Hola, alumnos. I am here with Ray Benson Language Academy showing you SpanishDictionary.com or SpanishAddict.com. Highly recommend this site. I cannot talk enough about this site. I always use it for all my Spanish students, which right now I happen to have more Spanish students than my other languages. And I always tell them to get on the site, register, and then there's a lot of grammar options. They always are changing the interface up here, but if you go up here on the top, you have the different tabs, and you go into grammar, and you basically have all your grammar lessons here, and you can search for the grammar topic. So day one, I always recommend just go over the alphabet. Right? It seems really basic, and it seems like uh, something that you might already know or whatever, but it's good to go over it anyways, just because Spanish has a different alphabet than English does. So there's a few things in here that I always make note of, that I clarify ahead of time. One example is like the double L. It's sometimes considered a whole nother letter, but basically it just makes a yeah or ja sound. You have the difference between the E Latina, which most people just call it E, right? And the Y. And most people just call it Y. Some people call it Y, but this one is a Greek I as opposed to a Latin I. And just other things. For example, the V, there's no V sound in Spanish, and so kind of gives us other ways to say that and how to differentiate it from the B, right? The B sound. So anyways, it's good to look over the alphabet. Then it gives you some really, really important pronunciation rules for the G and the C. Oh, and then it gives the rule for the double L, right? So always start here. Always look at the alphabet. Then we need, and this is what I always tell my students, the most important thing for learning Spanish is to know how the verbs work. So go to conjugation, and in the second week of our class, I say we're going to live in this conjugation tab, right? Well, not we, but the student is going to learn, going to live in the conjugation tab, right? So this is really, really convenient. You have this search bar and search for any verb that you want. I like to do hablar to start out an example. And then you're going to write down three things. Physically write it in your notebook. Three things. The infinitive of the verb. Don't worry about the English. Usually I don't recommend writing the English translation in your notebook, but it's totally fine if you do. And then the participles. And you have the progressive participle and you have the perfect participle. And if you hover over it, it gives you a direct translation of what it is, which is super helpful. And they give you a translation. And I mean, no other site does this that I know of. So this is just very, very helpful. And then the third thing that you're going to write down in your notebook is indicative chart. Okay, and the whole indicative chart. Let's see if I'm zoomed in a little bit too much, maybe. Zoom out a bit. Yeah. Well, in the indicative chart, there's a present, preterite, imperfect. These are both past tenses. Conditional and future tense. These are all different conjugations of the indicative mood of any verb. And you have to know this because I say learn all this at the same time. Because when you use Spanish, you're not only going to be talking in one tense. You're going to be talking in about the future and the past and the conditional and whatever. So just might as well learn it all. There is a bunch of information underneath the indicative chart, like the subjunctive and imperative, progressive. These are how you use the participles, the progressive and the perfect. And then it gives some examples, and it gives some other lesson suggestions, whatever. Don't worry about that. That will come, right? At first, get familiar with this indicative chart. So the three things that you write down. You write down the infinitive, hablar. Remember, all Spanish verbs end with R. Either AR, ER, or IR, right? And that's called the infinitive form. So there's an infinite amount of possibilities. Then you write down, maybe underneath it or to the right of it or something in your chart, the participles, right? And there's only two participles, right? The progressive participle, which is like the ing, and the perfect participle, which is, like a lot of them are ed, but there's a lot of irregulars too. So like for speak, it's spoken, right? We get a lot of our perfect participles are influenced by German, so you can blame them for having a lot of irregulars. And then the whole indicative chart. And this is so that you can get used to the patterns. You have to get used to the patterns. So I have a hierarchy of verbs that are important to learn because, certain verbs are more important than other verbs. So, for example, estar and ser are the most important verbs in Spanish. So you have to know those first. And when you start writing them down by hand in your notebook, you start to notice patterns, and then it becomes way more intuitive as you go to write them down, because you're noticing the patterns, and maybe you're learning it subconsciously, maybe consciously. So that's really good. And then if you have this really convenient check mark where you can immediately, instantly add and like include or remove vosotros according to what kind of Spanish that you're studying. So take advantage of that as needed, and also vos. The reason I like to have it in there in the beginning, just because it really helps highlight how these charts kind of logically run, is notice that there are three aspects. There's first person, second person, third person. And then the bottom three are the same. First person, second person, third person. But the top half is singular and the bottom half is plural. So it might look like a lot, but only it really is three aspects. And then just the top ones are singular and the bottom ones are plural. But they generally conjugate differently, so that is a little bit of a grind, but it's all right. It really doesn't take long to get used to the pattern. The pattern is very consistent, and even when there are irregulars, there are regular patterns in the irregulars. So don't worry about that too much. Then the stuff underneath it, like subjunctive, that is stuff that it's a nice reference here, and imperative and stuff, but we're going to learn that later on in grammar lessons and stuff. So that it's not really as helpful to write down in your notebook. But these three things, the infinitive, the participles, and the indicative chart, that is important to write down in your notebook. All right? So hopefully, oh yeah, I wanted to show you one more thing. Really awesome when you're first starting out is right underneath, so you go to conjugation tab, and right underneath the search bar, there's this AR, ER, IR, oh my, practice verb conjugations today. That will set you up with a little mini quiz, or it can be a gigantic quiz depending on how big of a test you want it to be. I usually recommend just doing 10, and then maybe change up what tenses you're practicing or whatever. Only crazy people do 500. But that's good. There's nothing wrong with being crazy when you're learning a language. So you can pick out what tenses you want to study, and you can pick what category and which pronouns you want to practice. I have a student who really needs to practice third person plural, so we set up this quiz with only the third person plural. I unchecked all those other boxes and we only did that one. And then what's really nice is it gives you the sample sentence, and you have to conjugate it correctly according to what tense it is on the top, right? So incredibly helpful website. I highly recommend using it. I'm not getting paid for saying any of this. I just really love it, and I know it will help you guys in your Spanish learning journey. So let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to assist you with anything. Check the description for a link to my website if you want to start studying Spanish with me and some of my students in my group classes. And let me know. And if you do sign up for them with SpanishDictionary.com, let them know I sent you, and maybe they'll want to collab more. I don't know. Let's see what happens. All right. Bye.